World Forum is an annual event organised by the Smith School here at the University of Oxford every year as a meeting place for people from academe, from industry, and from the political world, the leaders concerned with the issues around enterprise and the environment. And every year we have a thematic meeting. So back in 2009, when we started, the first World Forum was on the subject of the economic aspects of switching to low carbon economic growth. Is it feasible? That is now a done deal, and many countries are going down that route. The second year we tackled the biggest problem to arise from our discussions in the first year was how do we operate transport in a low carbon world out by 2050? What will we do in place of oil? And how do we go from where we are to where we need to be in terms of the transport of people and of freight? And this year we're taking on a very complex issue, which is how do we put a value, both a moral value and a price value, a financial value, on the ecosystem services that mankind depends on. So we co-evolved with the rest of our planet and with its atmosphere. And it is exactly what we needed. So as we co-evolved, the animals, the grass, the greenery, the trees, the level of oxygen and nitrogen in the air, the carbon dioxide, all of this co-evolved together, and mankind emerged in that, literally that atmosphere with all of those ecosystems, an essential part of our existence. Now the human footprint is so large, 7 billion people on the planet, that we are trampling many of these ecosystem services down that our future generations actually depend on. Amongst these ecosystem services is the atmosphere and hence the climate. But the focus of this meeting is going to be on biodiversity. So looking at what the biodiverse world, whether in the oceans or on land or in the air, delivers for us, and then how we can put a value on that. The meeting of the United Nations in Nagoya last year was the big culmination of a large amount of work on how we should manage this problem. And now we want to take this to the next stage. So at this meeting, moving on from Nagoya, we plan to bring together a community of people, political leaders, leaders from industry, leaders from society in general and from academia, to discuss how we take this forward. So the move beyond Nagoya means actually tackling practical problems on the ground. So what we will be doing is asking leaders from literally around the world to present examples where they think practical action has emerged, and we will then examine how we can turn that into something more generic that can be applied in yet other countries. Now, we're hoping that this proving by example will be a strong way for delivering into an economic discussion about adding value. Do we need new economic thinking in which we much more readily assign value to these externalities so that our internal economic system is altered in a way that enables us to do this? We will even be looking at the issues around, is the measurement of how a country is doing in terms of its GDP growth actually sufficient? And of course, by asking that question, I'm suggesting it's far from sufficient. This is what is pushing us down this steep slope into enormous future difficulties. So we need to re-examine, out of this discussion, the very basis of our economic thinking. So the principle of the World Forum is to bring in leaders who will bring us up to what is being done in the world, and then to break people down into working groups so that we can take the whole subject forward. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of argument, a lot of disagreement, and out of that, we will shape a document that represents all of that, but represents this major step forward that we're looking for. Everyone who's been invited, and it's entirely an invited audience, has been told this is a tough piece of work we're asking you to contribute to. I mean, it's an interesting question because I'm a chemical physicist and I've worked on experiment and theory around metal surfaces. So that's been my 40 years contribution towards science. And in doing that, I think it's fair to say that my biggest effort was to try and push the fundamental understanding of my corner of science. And at the same time, in various ways, I have been attempting to make some contribution towards understanding and contributing to the development of a practical ways forward out of the impasse that we seem to be heading into. Perhaps I could mention that the Times has invited me to write a letter. Every now and again they invite someone to write a letter to somebody they wish they had written to. And I thought about this, and I thought about all the people I've met, and should I write to George Bush and let him have it with both barrels, or should I write to Tony Blair, and so on. I chose to write to a young person who just arrived on the planet, my first grandchild. And essentially I have written to him saying, you know, I thought about you 10 years before you came into existence and what sort of a planet you were going to inherit. Now, my grandson's life expectancy, born in Britain today, is such that he is very likely to see in the 22nd century. What is he going to look at that century and say, we've got a long way to go, and thank goodness the people around the beginning of the 21st century managed the survival of our planet in the way they did? Or is he going to be looking at a planet in a somewhat wrecked state? I think that's the big driver for me. I think the real question is there really intelligent life on the planet? And the real test for that intelligence is not whether individuals can act in their own self-interest. That's what animals do very successfully. But are we able to act collectively in our joint interest? Can we manage the common, the global commons? Can we manage the common good? Can we place well-being for all of us ahead of wealth for the individual? So for me, that is now the test of our intelligence. We've done extraordinarily well in so many things. It's understanding what Voltaire understood some years ago when he wrote about humanity, but with reference to an inanimate piece of matter. No snowflake in an avalanche ever feels responsible.